and welcome everyone to our last Inspire Students Roundtable of the semester. Thank you all for being here. I'm Saif, a second-year IRPS student, and I work at the Alumni Relations Office with Karine, Charlotte, and Alexi. Before introducing the topic and our panelists, some practical information. This session will be recorded for those who are not able to attend today. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so if you are joining us online, please use the Q&A function, and for the ones present, feel free to ask your questions at the end of the roundtable. You can ask them, of course, either in French or in English. This roundtable is part of the Alumni Month, which is organized every year by the Alumni Office. The goal of our Inspiring Students project is to connect current students with alumni of the Institute to learn from each other. A big thank you to Charlotte, my colleague, for moderating today's roundtable. Today, we have a great chance to have two amazing panelists and recent graduates who work in different sectors, but who share an interest in matters relating to art and culture in relation to international relations, and the challenges they face in the present political moment. Thank you for being with us today and for taking the time to share your experiences. First, we have Luc Meyer, who has been the director of La Bec Résidence d'Artistes since its founding in 2018 in La Tour de Pévaux. La Bec focuses on artistic projects exploring nature, the environment, and technology. Previously, Luc developed the art technology program at Swiss Next San Francisco and Pro Helvetia from 2008 to 2012, and later coordinated the curatorial development of EPFL's Art Lab, serving as program director until 2018. Under his leadership, La Bec has hosted over 250 resident artists and 500 guests, emphasizing artistic development over finished cultural products and fostering long-term collaborations. Luc, thank you for being here. Second, we have Alvaro Cosi, who is a senior innovation lead at Switzerland for UNHCR, the national partner of the UN Refugee Agency in Switzerland. With a background in advertising, Alvaro initially worked as a creative and strategic planner before transitioning to venture building and innovation. In his current role, he leads efforts to foster a culture of innovation and experimentation within the organization to better address the needs of refugees and displaced persons. A key aspect of his work involves exploring innovative solutions from startups and other actors of the Swiss tech ecosystem and connecting them to the challenges faced by UNHCR. Thank you, Alvaro, for being here, and I will now hand it over to Charlotte, today's moderator.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you both. I've been meeting Alvaro in a workshop and Luc in Vevey. It's very nice to have you both. For me, it's also super important because I've been myself struggling to choose between like art and international relations for my future, and you are the proof that it's possible to do both, kind of. So yeah, thank you very much for being here. And I think we will just start up with the questions. So first, general question. Actually, two general questions. First, to begin, could you tell us about your journey with art and how have your studies influenced this relationship? We will start with Alvaro.
Thank you for having me. So I'm very happy to be here and to discover even like a bit more detail on the new structure, because actually it's been already almost 20 years ago, so I can see this. With art in general, I think it's really about exposure, about the city of Geneva itself, meaning maybe if you heard of when they introduced me, it's less direct, let's say link with the art is less obvious and less direct, but I would say that the art's always been part of my journey. My professional journey, but also before. I started with the Conservatoire in Geneva, and then although I wasn't directly involved with art in a matter of form, it's always been seen as a kind of a vector, kind of a tool that I've been using to convey messages or to come up with solutions, let's say.
And about your studies?
Studies really is about exposure, meaning being in Geneva. You're in a small town, like a small city, but with many, many opportunities in terms of art, a lot of exposure, and I was actually reminding myself, I've been away for almost 12 years, and coming back, seeing that you have like places like free music, like open airs, and theater, and all sorts of art in such a small city. So it's really is the smallest capital in the world, let's say.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And for you, Luc?
Well, thank you also, Charlotte, for inviting us. And thank you, Saif. Thank you, Karin. It's really a pleasure to be back here. And I think also for me to discover and to get lost in the in the very complex maze of this building. I think both of us are from the time where there was just a tiny little pink villa in the park down there and one 100-seater auditorium. That's about it. So it's always good and impressive to come back and see this. So to your questions, art for me. I think it's a thing that started early with me. That's very much family bound. I have two parents that didn't have particularly privileged access to culture, really sort of a standard Swiss middle class or lower middle class type of upbringing, but that were just super interested in art. Mostly, piles and piles of books coming through the house. My mom taping Jim Jarmusch movies on VHS tapes for me in the mid-90s, from late-night Arte TV programming, and me taping late-night MTV heavy metal broadcasts on the same tapes at the end, stuff like that. Us going to museums from my parents taking me and my sister to museums from a very early age, and not, I think that's important, never imposing any of these visits or any of the cultural content that was to be seen there as a must-see or part of some sort of cultural hall of fame that needed to be drilled into our young heads. So it's always about sort of very much accessibility, about sort of accessibility to any type of culture. And at the same time that this was around the family dining table or whatever, that culture was a serious subject of debate and was not simply a thing of entertainment, that it wasn't a product of entertainment. There's one of the great books about jazz and free jazz from late 60s, early 70s that's called As Serious as Your Life. And I think that's, it's a good, healthy rapport to have to arts and culture. So that to me has always stuck as this is the way I approach art. And I have, I think, a healthy distrust about anyone who champions themselves as the defender of popular culture. I have a distrust for populists who champion that against some supposed elitist culture. I think art in general as a vector of a shifter of perspectives for you, and at the same time as a factor of recognition, solidarity, and community building is very important, and there's no such thing as some sort of really obfuscating, elitist, and completely cut off from the world of culture. So that's important for me. And then to come to how my studies here in this institution and in this city sort of shaped me and my rapport to art. It was a very important step. I was coming from Vevey, which is about an hour away from here. Transferred here in Geneva at a time where the institute and what it provided in terms of teaching, back then the format was different. It was a 4-year licence system, so pre-Bologna, pre-bachelor's and master's systems in the late 90s. Just in Vevey, 100 kilometers away, pretty much nobody knew about this. So it was like I had one friend who studied here who told me, this could be cool for you too. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be doing this. And I spent the next 6 months explaining what it was. And so and back then we were a sort of range of students who came from all over Switzerland and from all over the world for something that generally their friends didn't really understand. So it was like sort of this weird little group here. It was really fun to connect to the city like this. Then to have culture being integrated as something that was analyzed as part of international relations. How was culture or artistic production sometimes used as a vector in international relations? Of course, with every post-war studies and so on, East and West investment in the German artistic world, etc. Cultural notions and notions of language leading to specific misunderstandings in the Second World War and so on. This was important. And at the same time, it was also important to be in Geneva as Alvaro, and to really, for me, it was my first relative big city experience living here, being involved in the cultural scene. I worked as a journalist, mostly music journalist for Le Courrier, the daily newspaper here in Geneva. Previous similar jobs for university magazines, which allowed me to go to a lot of concerts for free, a lot of exhibitions for free, to get piles of free CDs at home, etc. So a lot of access. At the same time, a first step also in participation and professional validation in the cultural world of the city back then. And basically my studies helped me develop this. I guess I spent about as much time as at Usine, Cardouz, and other underground music spaces as in classrooms here back then. Maybe don't, yeah.
Yes, yes, it's
keep
part
that
of
in mind, but voila, that's the way. So very important.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, how was your journey like from the end of your studies until now? And could you share some of your struggles and successes? We will start with Luc.
Okay. So, yeah, coming back to that thing of showing up in Geneva and having to explain to all of your sort of circle of friends what you were exactly doing here, and sort of having this sort of course of study that was a blend of many things and that nobody really completely understood immediately. That sort of then became a sort of trend for what I did afterwards, because I started to look for jobs, and back then I was like, okay, looks like some of my friends are going for bank jobs in Geneva, others are going for unpaid internships at the UN. Maybe there's something else to do. So I started looking for stuff around, both in Switzerland and internationally, and I ended up landing sort of a succession of jobs that didn't exist previously in institutions that were just born and still being defined. So the first internship I landed after my studies ended up being in San Francisco, with the then nascent Swissnex network, which is a network of sort of Swiss houses of science diplomacy, broadly said, that started opening in the early 2000s in places of sort of high sort of knowledge-intensive places, the Boston, Cambridge area, San Francisco Bay Area, and then later offices in China, in India, now in Brazil as well, Japan, and so on. And I started working on interdisciplinary programs with them, mostly aiming to build bridges between arts and the science and technology themes that were dominant in this institution. So I did that for a bit, and then I did something fairly similar in Japan also, working on the World Expo 2005 there, but also mostly on cultural programs, and always sort of, there was always some sort of institutional drive and then some random accidents. I was in Japan, I was a fan of Japanese improvised music, spending a lot of time in tiny clubs. The Swiss were over working on the World Expo 2005. They were bringing a lot of artists, musicians over. They didn't know where they actually had to play in Japan, so I ended up asking me, seems you spend a lot of time in these clubs, can you get us another gig or something? And so bit by bit, I ended up managing these music programs for the Swiss Arts Council and Present Switzerland, who managed the presence at the World Expos, and so on. Back in San Francisco for a few years, and then I did, again, an interdisciplinary art science, art technology program for EPFL in Lausanne, where the then president of the school, Patrick Ebicher, really wanted to have a new angle for both research at the school and public programs within the institution, with what was back then called EPFL Art Lab. It is now called EPFL Pavilions, and it's basically a series of exhibition spaces where you can test technologies and knowledge coming out of this mostly science and tech-oriented school in the cultural domain. How can you use technologies from the school to innovate in exhibition design? How can you manage cultural heritage through digitized collections and so on? And how can you at the same time develop a critical discourse around technology through the presence of artists who use or criticize these technological tools? So that was important to me, and that's also what guides me at LABEC, which was a new project when I developed it from 2018 on, and is also sitting at some sort of interdisciplinary crossroads between the arts and more global notions, urgent notions of an ecological nature. And so that's sort of the
Thank you so much. What about you?
Well, if I will be like defining it or summarizing in like one word, it will be probably unexpected. Probably has to do a lot with multidisciplinary context of studies as well. which really make you go out there, see different things, learn different things as well. And in my case, actually, I'm a guy from Geneva, from Carouge to be precise. So it's actually I went to school next door, pretty much. So things didn't really changed for me, unlike maybe Luc, coming from Brevet, like Montreux, very, although very close, very far. And even more, given the licence system before Bologna, because the first part of your studies were actually taking place in Unimail or la faculté de lettres, which are literally in Plein Palais, so next door from Carouge, if you know a little bit how it goes. So for me, it was literally like taking the tramway, a few stops more. So seeing my friends, seeing the same people. So with this in mind, it was kind of like a no-brainer. All right, I like international relations. I like things happening around the world. I'm not really sure what I want to do, so let's go there. I've seen quite a bit of people doing it, and it seems super interesting. So I pretty much continued that way professionally as well, since part of my family come from Venezuela. And back in the days, you had like pretty much no Venezuelans in Geneva, like now. And they quickly asked me to become part of back in the day it was called the Human Rights Commission, so the former, what is now the Council, to be part of, take part in the Venezuelan delegation of the Human Rights Commission. So that was like my first really professional experience while I was actually studying. And it was super interesting, although quickly, it's relative, everything is like, in 4 years, I realized that I didn't want to do human rights or rights, anything legal, which wasn't really for me. And I completely switched. And that's what Geneva is also great for, is that you have like all those small cities, you have a lot of like different sectors and area where you can actually look into and that you can be interested in. And I completely switched to marketing and brand management. So I ended up at Procter & Gamble, even without doing anything in marketing. And it was quite actually interesting, because I told them, I've never done any marketing actually. Why did you accept that I actually work for you? And they say, well, no worries, we created marketing, we'll teach you. So back in the days, they were like saying, they were hiring like half people, like 50% of the recruits came from marketing and 50% didn't come from marketing. So coming from HU, my graduate institute back in the day, was like super like, okay, they really prepared you for that. And I think that the single word that really connects or really will explain also the atmosphere at HU, graduate institute, sorry, it's very hard for me to actually change it, is that you really know you're all when you hear people saying HU. I mean, if I had to find one word, it would be really curiosity about like whatever you were studying. It was super interesting, and you always like have this curious mind about like really step outside, step out, and out of your comfort zone as well. So I did marketing, and that's how I ended up afterwards in advertising agencies. So I moved on the creative side of the sector. Worked in many countries actually, from London, Buenos Aires. Those are cities, I know, but I mean like Casablanca, Morocco, Brussels, where we last met, and after a while, indeed, creating things was actually what interested me the most. And whether you're creating it on an ad or a campaign, it's also about creating maybe businesses as well. So that's when I created a startup that was incubated by the federal government in Belgium, which then, when we sold it, had a lot of time in my hands. And I said, okay, maybe I could use this experience and go back to what my studies were supposed to lead me to, international relations. And I ended up at UNHCR, the private sector partnership department, and then unit, and then opening up what we call national partner, which is a kind of a joint project from UNHCR, giving it a bit more flexibility. Connecting with Swiss private partners. So that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Very impressive. Okay, so now what does your daily work look like? Can you give us a snapshot? Like, what does your day look like? And we will start with Luc.
Okay. Yes, my current sort of daytime schedule. So I now run an artist residency in La Tour de Paix, in which I at any time host 8 residency projects. A majority of these are solo projects. There's quite a few duo or collective projects. So I always have somewhere between, say, 8 and 16 people, artists, who spend periods of about 3 months with me and my team in a specific location in La Tour de Paix. So there's a daily life, there's daily demands, there's daily artistic work being done, but rather in a research mode. People are not so much sort of racing to finish pieces for a defined exhibition or racing to finish an album, finish a performance they'll bring to a specific stage. They're more in sort of an earlier stage of research in their work. So there's a sort of complexity with that and the type of searching that is specific to each of these characters. So I have to manage this. I have to manage a team that works with these people and works with me. And I'm also in charge of everything that's external to that little sort of world in itself, and that little campus in a way. So I have to find money to run the place. We have a mother foundation that provides us with a solid base, but I need to find the partnerships and define, what the financial parts are, what the counterparts are we are offering to partners. And also I have to represent the institution. I'm not alone in doing this because I have a team that's perfectly capable of representing the institution, and I hate to be the boss that sort of is the only one traveling and the only one taking the limelight. So I have colleagues that are also ambassadors for the place, but I will tendentially be the one who takes the most travel to take part in conferences, in international juries, and also traveling internationally to see how other residencies, artist residencies function, and to see what's the state of the art in terms of working with artists, communicating that common work, and so on. So basically my day, if it is a Swiss-bound day, it's going to be trying to do the stuff we have to do every day, all the little organizational things with the artists, do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. That's something that we have had time to rehearse, test, and so on. And then to possibly open up the majority of the day for focused, personalized interactions with all of the characters we host, because to me they're not simply content fodder that I just grind through an infrastructure that needs to be the defining motto of the place. They're the prime driver of this. They're the artists, and without them we don't function. So we try to give them a lot of dedicated space and to work according to their needs and to get them where they want to be going. And so it's really sort of organizing the day to get the organizational stuff done as quickly as possible, maybe in the morning, and then to free up the rest of the day to have these specific interactions.
Well, thank you. And what about you?
So what does my day look like? Actually very different from each other. I really don't know how my days will look like a week before. The simple reason that my job today is mainly about connecting the dots. So that dot can be very different from each other. It could be going with like a street artist to a refugee camp in Rwanda, all the way to actually organizing like a very VIP, what we call high net worth individuals, events in Geneva to sell some digital art. And then all the negotiation that goes around it. So the preparation, the planning, the finding out ideas as well. Right now I'm working on a very different project, for example, that has nothing to do with art per se. So art is a huge tool, and I think we're discussing this afterwards. But for example, now I'm seeing how refugee camps can can become like recycling centers where refugees can, pick up plastics, recycle it, and we can actually use that as a kind of a plastic offsetting solution for big companies to buy and offset their plastic consumption. So that's really about connecting the dots. So every day is like super different and quite, let's say, a bit wild lately. You probably heard about it in the sector. But yeah, that's what I like about this. Super different.
From your perspective, what is the role of art and artists in today's world, and how does it interact with international relations? Maybe we'll start with you.
All right. So I quickly mentioned it, but for me, art is an amazing tool, a great conveyor of feelings, of emotion, touches minds, touches hearts. And I didn't mention it, but when we launched National Partner, so Switzerland NHR, I actually was tasked to launch the communications unit first. And within this work, we then opened the innovation one. So for communication makes totally sense. It's quite obvious. The idea to, one of the main tasks of communication units really is to at UNHCR is to raise awareness, to do some advocacy as well. So for this, you need to convey a message. And people, nowadays, a lot of people are saying same communication, same kind of, a lot of actors. It's a very crowded ecosystem, very crowded market or country. So you need to stand out, stand out a little bit. You need to find ways for your message to be seen. And as I was mentioning, really touching hearts and minds, make you think, make you feel how is it to be, for example, in our example, how is it to be a refugee? Why are we doing this? How you can be involved with the cause, how you can support. So art is an accelerator, actually. And you have different arts for different targets, I would say. Some artists luckily speak to a lot of people. One of our Google ambassadors is, we used to have Angelina Jolie, so obviously Angelina Jolie, everyone knows her, but for some targets, you're not going to be able to, her message won't be doing the same thing somewhere else, so that's why you have musicians, you can work on music projects. At some point, we even worked with a skateboarding factory that actually were creating artworks on decks, on skateboard decks, with major artists, like actually, Ai Weiwei and other ones. And that actually touched a particular target that we wanted to target at that point. So really it's an accelerator and an amazing, powerful tool to convey a message.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think art for me principally, and artists are perspective shifters. They'll maybe have you look at something that's common in your life, but in a completely new angle that might either or, maybe both, shake you to your foundations. Wow, this completely flips my worldview on something particular, or my way of feeling things, or also comforts you and says, wow, somebody else made this sound like this sound I had in my head, or somebody else painted what I had in mind, etc. So there's both sort of this thing of complete estrangement and complete recognition. Often they end up weirdly also blending. So to me, this is a very important sort of function of the artist, basically, and of art, to have this sense of perspective shifting and to create new solidarities through this. And this is important also in terms of what Alvaro was mentioning. Then you can position art in particular contexts, in particular sectors, for particular means, but also what the art carries in itself will remain mostly a set of very probing questions rather than defined answers. And the fact that this remains, that this can, this probing can exist on very globally exposed platforms, and that it allows a specific complexity to survive, is particularly important in international relations, especially given the current context we're in, where there is just a global dumbing down of ways we communicate with each other, ways politics are framed, ways cultures are framed. It's very important that this role of things don't have simple answers, questions will beckon more questions, complexity will beckon more complexity, that this remains is extremely important.
Perfect, thank you. So now I have specific question for each one of you, and we will start with you, Luc.
Yeah.
So at LABEC, you focus on supporting the creative process rather than producing finished cultural products. Why is this approach essential today, and how does it shape the global conversations on contemporary challenges?
Yeah. So yeah, the way we are mostly exposed to art is generally through some sort of what we might, grossly summarize, consider the finished form of an artistic production. You go in a museum, you see a bunch of paintings. You go to a theater, you see a play that's been sort of rehearsed and is present in its finished state. You go see a concert, and you see a band go through a repertory they've, rehearsed and now present on stage, and so on. And that's the way most of us as a public, as an audience, will apprehend cultural production. But before that, there's a long phase in artistic work, whether it is these rehearsals, these jams, whether it's a painter who will find illumination through a series of books they wrote, or some random encounter with somebody else, a scientist, another painter, a writer, etc., etc. All of this stuff doesn't really get documented, doesn't really get valued properly, and even tends to, in artistic processes, to be devalued by the artists themselves. I read a lot of funding applications from artists who are seeking money from whatever possible funding body, whether public, whether private, etc., whether in Switzerland, internationally. And there is a tendency in the way artists present their work and how it is financially structured to downgrade that research part. What I want to do is this grand project. And before that, there's a long, boring phase where I'll just be by myself and researching. That won't cost you anything, and I basically don't really spend money doing it. And then so they tend to maybe even forget, to at least obfuscate the fact that yes, this phase has a value, that it has a cost also, and that it needs to be provided with good conditions in order to really happen in the way it should. So an artist residency, typically it is a bit our role to give people time, space, and financial support so that they can sort of relieve a little bit of the day-to-day pressures. Maybe, take a break from a day job that allows them to function as artists. Maybe take a break from an exhibition calendar that's often very pressuring, and so on. And to really take a bit of time to also reconsider their practice, and so on. So this is very important. It's very easy also to turn that stage into another pressure point. Now you do this residency, you've had 3 months here, you've had ample time and space and money. What do you have to show with it? So it's really about also refraining from that and really letting artists sort of be the holders of the ethics of their time with us, and to really say, okay, I have this time for myself, this is how I intend to use it. The end goal, yes, probably in another year, another 2 years, there will be an exhibition featuring these pieces. There will be a concert featuring songs or whatever music pieces that I have sort of birthed at the residency. But for that time, this is not important. It's really about the time you spend researching itself. And it's very funny because it's a structure that we work a lot with the Swiss Arts Council, or Pro Helvetia, which is the main public institution managing basically import and export of Swiss culture, very present internationally. During the COVID years, the director of Pro Helvetia, who's a good colleague of ours, he said, well, with this crisis, we noticed that our funding tools are pretty inadapted for periods like this. All of our tools are basically here to support the production of, the promotion of, and the distribution of the finished cultural product. Again, like your paintings, your concert, that product. And now that we are in a period, back then during these 20 and 21 years, now that we're in a situation where no one can show anything anywhere, artists come back to us and they say, what can we do together now? Because that end game has suddenly disappeared. So suddenly people start paying attention to the phase before. What do you do when you simply research? And so that phase started getting a lot of consideration, and institutions such as residencies are very important in this. And so we try to really focus on this, develop a sort of work discipline on that, but that's entirely based on the artist specifics.
Perfect, thank you so much. And your question, so you had many projects, and could you tell us about one or more recent projects that you feel very proud of?
Okay, so as you say, many projects took place. I've been a chair for the last 6 years, so I had the time to do a few of those. Obviously, one of the big highlights was really working with a French artist called, maybe you know him, JR, and so really connecting the dots between in this case, how the ways using contemporary forms of advertising, let's say, but for a cause, will actually help us convey our message and touch a lot of people to raise awareness about people forced to flee. So in that case, it was quite straightforward. No? I mean, he's really raising awareness about people and giving an image, giving a voice to people who don't have a voice, which is pretty much what we're trying to do at UNHCR. In this case, we were talking about people forced to flee, so refugees and other internally displaced. So when we contacted him, he immediately was really motivated about the project and really curious, so not really imposing anything, saying, okay, tell me what's the situation, how can I help you, pretty much. And we ended up creating those huge tarpaulins with images of refugees, so that will be shown from above, taking picture with a drone. So really telling people we exist, we are here, and we matter, and we have a voice. So in this case, actually, we have an image. So we went to 5 refugee settlements in Rwanda, in Colombia, actually in Ukraine as well, in Greece, and recent one, right? And last one, yeah, in actually Greece, Rwanda, yeah, I think, and Mauritania, sorry, the Sahel region. And this really gave us a lot of visibility in terms to the message, and it was really nice. Then all the 5 tarpaulins were reunited in Europe and reunited together. So it's the same message, same cause. And one of the more recent work I've been involved with, so it's a lot more with innovation actually, is finding how data visualization can create and become a piece of art, and how can we turn it like a normally boring thing like data, how can we turn it into art, and so it can actually touch hearts and touch minds. So we did a fundraiser with Christie's, the famous auction house, and invited many digital artists to actually work on the topic. And one of the artists actually used our data on displacement, but also on asylum request result, and created a piece of art where, I hope I describe it correctly, where actually you see hands representing the 12 richest countries, and the hand opens up if the result of asylum seekers request, the percentage goes up, so the hand opens up and then closes down if, for example, that year there is a decrease in acceptance numbers. And it's an ongoing artwork which will exist for 10 years. So that's what actually digital art allows you to do. So every year you will be arrested and you'll see different hands, but you don't know which country is what, obviously. So yeah, that's a very like mind-opening kind of new ways of doing art, or at least using art for cause.
Excuse me, these artists work for free?
Yes, I mean, if they don't work for free, we're not paying for it, at least. Meaning, sometimes you have a patron who sponsors the whole operation. In the collaboration with Christie's, it was for free, but with JR, obviously, all this travel and everything. And I'm not like involved with the exact numbers, but the fact that then all the artworks, the tarpaulins, the giant refugee kids artworks were all brought to Turin actually, was actually part of a deal they had with the National Gallery in Turin to actually have it all together, so that to sponsor the whole thing. The Ukraine girl, so it was the first artwork, actually made the cover of the Time magazine right after the invasion of Ukraine, and obviously that also was, I guess, our role as UNHCR really was to facilitate, to explain the situation, and to how to better, have let's say in showcasing situation and the message.
In case you need a patron, you will be looking for the patron at UNHCR?
It can happen or not, but in this case, it wasn't us. No. I mean, he's a quite famous artist, so I guess he knows more patrons than we do. in any case. For the Christie's one, it's digital arts. I know that some of the artists were sponsored by patrons, but without any anything only by the fact that actually they were participating in this venture. And Christie's, they do these not-for-profit work from time to time, and they provide the platform. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I will recommend going to LABEC. They have like open studios days. It was last Saturday.
There was one last Saturday, but yes, I stupidly forgot the stack of brochures about the residency I was intending to bring over here this morning. Sorry for that, but best way, I have a few cards. Our website is labec, LABECUE.ch. There's a lot of information on there. You find all of the profiles of the artists we host, and you will find, you can also sign up for a newsletter, or you go, the best way is you go on our Instagram, which is very, very dense and has a lot of info. You will also find all of the events we have. So we work on 3 trimesters per year, and we conclude each of these 3 trimesters by an open studio session. Next one will be in late July. That's a perfect time to come to LABEC. We're really right on the lake, so you can come and check out some pretty cutting-edge artistic propositions and go for a dip in the lake. In the meantime, emerge and get a cold beer from our lakeside chalet, etc. So there's a lot of fun stuff to see, and there's a lot of other events. We do concerts, roundtables with some of our residents. There's plenty, and there will be plenty of occasions, especially the spring and summer, to come and visit us. So please do. Voilà.
Yeah, I highly recommend. It is a wonderful place to be. Yeah, so now, if you have any questions for our panelists, yes?
Hi. First, thank you for the event. But just briefly, I'm a research associate at the Global Governance Center here. I got my PhD in autumn in IR, International Relations, and the title of my work was Forms of Power in the Transnational Field of Art, Exploring Russian Actors and Artistic Sites Beyond Russia's Territorial Borders. So I was very much studying art and power of art, and how Russian state and Russian elites accumulated power and converted power through art. So super happy to hear a topic on this about this at the institute. So I'm actually based in Montreux, and I have never been there, so I'll put that on my list. I'm now currently on my postdoctoral phase, based in Montreux, and have been living now for a couple of years in Switzerland. My question is related to this Bourdieusian, or the field of art in Switzerland. So basically, how would you, since you both have different, but I think complementing insights about the field of art in Switzerland, I'm curious to hear more about that, about the landscape, structure, perhaps the nature of the field of art, which you mentioned some of the big names like the Swiss Arts Council and these kind of important institutions. Just as an example, in Finland, where I come from, we have Kone Foundation, Kone, which makes elevators and escalators, and they have a very important foundation, Kone Foundation, that supports artists and also researchers like me. I've had a couple of times grants from them to do research related to arts in a way or another. So could you please shed light on the field of art in Switzerland? Thank you.
I can start. Maybe it's the Swiss art context is we're lucky to have still a fairly well-structured and still fairly well-funded public support system for the arts. And it starts on the educational level. We have art universities, university-level art schools that are of very high level. In French-speaking Switzerland, starting here in Geneva, you have HED, you have ECAL in Lausanne, and you have EDA in Valais. That's a sort of French-speaking network. And then if you take into account the Lucerne Art School, the ZHDK in Zurich, the Basel Institut Kunst, and Bern as well, you have about 10 to a dozen of high-quality university-level art schools that deliver pretty top-notch education for, public school fees. So again, these are very desirable institutions as well. There's a network of then, I would say, production support, national production support, which is structured. You can ask for funding, whether it is for a personal art project or for one that is channeled through an institution, whether it's an association, a foundation, other types of structures at a local level. City of Geneva, city of La Tour de Paix, where we are, city of Vevey right next to it, slightly bigger. You can go to your canton and ask for public funds. And you can go to the national level, where an institution such as Pro Helvetia, the Swiss Arts Council, will probably help you take your work abroad, and will also offer counterparts, so that the countries they send you can also send people to Switzerland. So that's all fairly well structured. There's also a series of national, cantonal, and then national awards on a yearly cycle. So if you go to Basel during the Art Basel Week in mid-June, there's an entire section at a slight remote of the commercial center of the fair, where you will find the yearly exhibition of the Swiss Art Awards and the Swiss Design Awards, etc. And so all of these types of awards, completed by private prizes such as the Manor Art Prize, the Mobilière Prize, etc. They really make for a very strong network and strong financial support for artists who are rather sort of, starters or mid-career people who get pretty strong support. So and so now I'm already talking about the private sector, but like on the public end, it's really in terms of education, in terms of local support, and then import-export support. It's really pretty well structured. And then in parallel to that, you have a solid net of corporates, private foundations that both support activities in the country. Sometimes it's pure cash. Léonard Foundation in the Canton de Vaud. And of course, over here, I'm blanking out now on the Rolex Wilsdorf Foundation. So, it might be private support, it might be, HEAD, the new campus of HEAD was paid, in a large part due to also Rolex-related money. So you have all of this. It can turn into also private museums, Museum Souche in Graubünden, for example, these types of initiatives. And then, of course, it can also link you to an international network. And so when you see, for example, for young Swiss artists, you really have examples of in the last few years of people completing a 3 or 5 year study cycle at ECAL in Lausanne, already getting some pretty solid networking skills during that time, then getting maybe their first show in Paris in the second exhibition room of the Swiss Cultural Center, Centre Culturel Suisse in Paris, which is the Paris antenna of the Swiss Arts Council. So you get a first exposure there. You're going to meet your Parisian network. Maybe a gallerist will take you to a first sort of private platform, and so on. So it's very well structured. It's even so well structured that sometimes these Swiss artists say, hey, I haven't had a breather since I graduated because people always want to show my stuff, and I would need exactly the type of time you can get into a residency. So it's pretty well done, and yeah.
So it's quite specific, maybe for Luc, whereas the perspective is less on Switzerland, the actors. So no, indeed, but as a Genevan, I totally agree with some of the actors there.
And then the interplay between sort of private money and public structures and money and private money is pretty strong. If you take, Kunsthalle Basel, or within the Kunsthalle systems in Switzerland, this is probably more prominent. If you take the board of Kunsthalle Basel, you will find people who are either lawyers, bankers, who have been involved in contemporary art in Switzerland for 30 plus years, who are among the biggest collectors of art themselves, etc. And it's a very tight-knit system that somehow works, I would say, remarkably well in terms of still preserving artists from sort of direct influences. You shouldn't do this work. You shouldn't be showing this. You shouldn't be going there. There's a remarkable preservation of freedom. I would say not too much of an influence and no sort of oligarchic class converting sort of whatever garage museum in Moscow, etc. There's nothing really similar to that in Switzerland, although potential money power is somehow similar.
Thank you all both very much for being here, and I had a follow-up question leading off that. What are the prospects for students that have never formally pursued artwork in an academic setting? So I'm a political science student here like most of us are, and I'm also an artist, but I've never done it academically, and I definitely would be interested in getting into the art world, but I'm not quite sure how to do that. I'd appreciate advice.
Mm-hmm. I think, again, maybe both of our profiles show that on the organizational side of stuff, you don't need to have whatever a PhD in arts management or anything like that to be active in the sector.
Yeah, completely. I think the art world is a big word. I mean, it's what do you want to do and which kind of art as well. I mean, personally, I was also a programmer at a jazz festival, the oldest opener in Belgium actually, for 4 years. So really, Graduate Institute leads you everywhere, and it's more about what are you interested in. I mean, we work a lot with Art Basel, actually, as an UNHCR. And so yes, you are involved with the art world in a different way. Again, and how do you bring to life partnerships between private actors and artists to convey a message, but also to mobilize people for a cause. So that's a way of working with art. Then if you're an artist yourself, I guess it might be another way. I'm not personally, I never experienced this, but maybe Luca knows more. But I would say that my advice would be more about what are you interested in the art world?
And I think even for a career as an artist, again, it doesn't need to be that diploma that necessarily attests that you are an artist. There's also a lot of people with an artist diploma who insist on being one, where you're really come on, it's actually not your thing in the end. So typically it could be with your depends of what you're doing, but maybe that background in political science may be an asset also in terms of what type of art you're going to be doing. Let's say even like for artists, they're probably very relevant to discourse within an international relations school. Maybe some of you know about forensic architecture, the sort of international collective around some Israeli forensic architects who really research specific events in specific conflicts to see how they really happened and how they shaped narratives on either sides of conflicts. They did absolutely great research and transposed that research on a wider sort of art-related communication platforms about migration patterns and impediment to migration in the Mediterranean. And these guys come with, it's a collective with political scientists, architects, forensic specialists, data visualization specialists, film specialists, etc., etc. So there's a role for particular competencies, and then if you like, but I'd still like to, test my own artistic acumen. Yeah, I don't know what you're doing, whether it's sound, whether it's painting, etc. Maybe you're like, hey, this is a great city for meeting people who are in this. Like, go to openings, go to events that head organizes. They have a lot of conferences. They have a lot of student shows, etc. And maybe already some people there, but maybe go and mingle further. And then maybe after testing the waters like this, you're like, hey, maybe I'll sign up for another 2 years of studies after here. I'll grant myself this time and see if I fit in that context, if it brings me something. Because there will be, like you do here, there will be tools, analytical tools, ways of making that will be explained to you. So it might be interesting. And at the same time, it's tough if you decide not to do it that way. It's also capacities that you may acquire on your own through friends, whatever, random encounters and a belief in your own will to do that.
I think we have a question online.
I have a question myself.
You.
Yes. I'd like to thank both of you for the wonderful insights. You both briefly mentioned jazz, and recently a documentary film came out called Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which talks about the role African American jazz musicians had in the decolonial movement. And I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on the role art can play in IR, specifically in the transgressive form, and how this interacts with the dynamics today. Like the idea that, of course, anyone can, go viral nowadays, any song, any piece of art, etc. But also, we live in a globalized world where Egyptian musicians can comment on like American political events and vice versa. So I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts.
I haven't seen the documentary you mentioned, but maybe it references also the Pan-African Festival,
Yes.
where a lot of American jazz and free jazz musicians came over to play, and a lot of them opted to stay in Europe at a time where they were still just subject to physical threats in the US at a time where in the 60s, they're still not solved, but there was like blatant racism, physical threats to a lot of musicians, whether it's Miles Davis getting beat up in front of clubs on 54th Street, whether it's Archie Shepp getting threats, etc. So a lot of these guys came over to Europe also because there was an audience and back then also financial backers who were willing to pay these people money. Whereas in the US it was extremely dry. I don't know, like people, are now considered foundation, whatever. Ronette Coleman, Archie Shepp, etc. All these guys were playing for like next to nothing in the US. And in Europe, you had Fondation Mect in the south of France, you had different institutions hosting them, and Don Cherry ended up living in Sweden for most of the 70s, also because there was a receptive audience and financial support to do the arts. So it's funny because it's like that happened, for example, this immigration of black American jazz artists in the 60s and 70s to Europe happened outside of the official political drive of having Western cultural representation supported and sort of massing up in Berlin against what the Eastern Bloc was doing as propaganda. These guys were not part of that system. They came on their own and they were facing danger in the US, which was the main proponent of that program. So it's really interesting to follow these margins. And I think for me also seeing the experience we have with the artist residency, yes, there is an opportunity for also sort of like bigger and sort of transcultural communication, virality, different people can emerge. But there's also, I would say even more importantly, again, the need of having communities that form, that are not necessarily going public and that not necessarily address the whole world and that don't necessarily also document everything they do. We have these discussions more and more. How can you have sort of instances where you share content, where you listen to each other, but it's not necessarily a fully public event? There might be a necessity for fully public in some kind of cases, but it also means you will have to probably simplify what you say at some point for it to be consumable by everyone. So there's more and more a growing need also of like these small communities without going to, a close community means they're probably preparing some kind of weird thing that's dangerous for the others, etc., which is something you hear in the arts, There's often an underground movement, will often be a club or whatever, will often be targeted by police forces because these people are alone in a basement, they're listening to weird music, they're probably comploting and they have something bigger in mind. So it's like, all of this stuff is very important.
No, I mean, you have like many examples of the impact and the power of art, either triggering a consequence or actually being at the end of a political movement as well. I remember as well, I lived in Brussels for 5 years, so obviously, when you had the DRC independence, you had that famous, I don't remember the band, but actually that famous song that actually was created and became the image of the entire independence movement in Congo. But yeah, all the way from Guernica, Picasso's Guernica, that really brought the Civil War, like the Spanish Civil War's movement, cause to the public eye in Paris first, and then the rest of the world. When we were, I give the JR example, when we were to Mauritania, first thing they did is actually to set us up and give us a concert of blues, Tuareg blues, because for them it was a way to convey actually the message they brought from their home, and I like the way you have like movement of creolization as well, where like different movement gather. If you look at the most like famous, probably most famous shabby artists in the world are actually in France or in Belgium. So this kind of creolization movement is also super interesting. I was previously also talking about the Afghani situation, where we had like entire arts actors and cultural actors and orchestras who are actually right now being in a situation of forced displacement or moving to Portugal in the case of the youth orchestra of Afghanistan. So all this is both a consequence, I would say, of international relations like situation, but also sometimes to help trigger or mobilize or become the personification, if I may say, of an entire movement.
I think we have a question over there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Abhinay. I'm from India. I've graduated as a mechanical engineer and worked in an IT industry, and then I worked in social sector. And then I decided that, okay, let me look into this international development studies, and I came here. But along with it, I've been practicing writing and visual arts, and been practicing for more than 6-7 years. And all throughout, whenever I get a chance, like random encounters, I got a chance to exhibit my work. I've done a couple of exhibitions in India and also in Switzerland, in Geneva, the institute itself, and then a couple in Germany. Having done a lot of things and not academically pursuing art, visual art, I kept doing things. And right now at this juncture, if I want to continue to work in art space and also in international relations and international development studies, what more can I do? Because we had some couple of courses during in our things like arts and designs and social sciences. I picked that up, and then we chose something on climate change, and we picked the Tuvalu Island, and we did some art projects, and we submitted to other platforms and got featured. And right now I'm doing a master thesis on music and its effect on acculturation in the context of migration. So whenever there's a chance I'm trying to pursue, I'd like to seek more mentorship and advice on what more can be done, or how focusedly should I explore things.
And actually, you mentioned this when we met with Charlotte. It was really like, I had no idea I will be taking the path I've been taking. So it's really about an opportunity, and the setup you're in today, although challenging and let's say feels like anything could change at any moment, is a fantastic setup. I lived in many countries, and honestly, it's not that common to have everything in such a small town and meeting people everywhere. And I would say that it's really about continue to be curious, open, and see the opportunities arise, and don't give up. I would say if you have like an idea in mind, if you see yourself somewhere interested in something, keep on pushing. And it might not work yet. I ended up working for Procter & Gamble. I would never have seen myself working for a big corporate. I did it, and it was super interesting. And they opened the way to working as a creative for advertising agencies in London and Argentina afterwards. So really, it's one thing leads to another. I will say my suggestion would be, continue to be positive and see what interests you most. At some point, you'll meet people with the same interests, and keeps on opening the doors. And really here, Geneva is a great place for this. Because it's like a village at the end of the day, to be honest. It's everyone, at some point, you'll meet everyone. So.
Yeah, and it seems, because you mentioned you have writing practice, you have painting practice, and then at the end you casually mentioned that you're doing a thesis on music and international relations. So it sounds like you have a whole bunch of bases covered, and it's just sort of keep on pushing them, and then see which ones also both instinctively and by randomness you will sort of like end up doing more than the other. I would say there's no established, like, okay, I do painting, so I need to find myself a gallery or whatever. That's, you can have that thought, but it doesn't need to be a driver. and you can do a thesis, but you may choose not to continue in the field, or you'll say, no, I want to dig this a bit further. It's very open, yeah. And again, yeah, Geneva, I think, and this sort of Swiss ecosystem, because in the end, it's one big city with a bunch of very big parks in the middle, and big hills. But it's so easy to go and check out what's going on in Basel, in Zurich, and it's very easy also to get acquainted with people who are part of these networks as well. Again, you might bump into them at that next head vernissage or at the next one at Centre d'Art Contemporain here or in MAMCO. It's all so concentrated. Most of the artists we have coming, doing residencies with us come from abroad. It's crazy how much there is on such a small territory in all of these towns that are all pretty smallish by themselves. When you put the whole thing together, there's not much that can compete actually in terms of density, and it's also pretty much all very accessible. Most of the openings are public, so the people are fairly accessible.
Other questions?
Well, thank you very much.
There's one question.
I have several people online, and they all say, thank you, it's so interesting. When we have the video, they ask for your emails, of course, and your biography.
And even Instagram.
Absolutely. So in fact, with the people who registered and the people online, we have about 100% of people who said we are interested in culture. It's the beginning, but it's the starting point.
So once again, thank you, Luc. Thank you, Alvaro, for this inspiring discussion. And thank you, Charlotte, for having hosted the roundtable. This was the last roundtable. So we would like to thank you all for a wonderful Alumni Month, and we hope to see you again next year. Our next events include the World Alumni Day on May 16th, which also happens to be the International Day for Living Together in Peace, and the annual Alumni Reunion on September 13th. Mark the date, and we hope to see you there. I now invite you all to join us for a small networking coffee break with some drinks and snacks just outside. And for those of you who wish to talk to Alvaro and Luc, you can also stay here or online to chat with them for another few minutes. Thank you.
Ah oui, moi j'avais une question.